Hello, I'm Greg Hunter. Welcome to USAWatchdog.com. With us once again, Paul Craig Roberts, actually Dr. Paul Craig Roberts. He has a PhD in economics, and he was an Assistant Treasury Secretary in the Reagan administration. He was responsible for all economic policy for the United States of America. Dr. Paul Craig Roberts, thank you for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com.
Pleased to be with you again, Greg.
Well, you have your own website. It's paulcraigroberts.org. And your last three articles, you're talking written a lot about this spy program and the revelations that have come about with Snowden. And three articles back, you talked about how this was going to take the world to war. And you didn't bring up the fact that that we had, 5,000 Marines on the border between Syria and Jordan and pieces of the 1st Armored Division. You didn't bring up the fact that we're arming basically Al-Qaeda in Syria, which we did in Libya. You didn't bring up the fact we're having all these drone strikes in places like Somalia and Pakistan and Yemen and, other places in the world. What you really centered your articles around about how important and what kind of a revelation it was for the United States to be not just spying on all Americans, but what it appears to be spying on the world, including our allies. And you're saying that this can take the world to war. Can you explain that?
Well, Greg, that's not quite what I said. What I'm saying is that the acceptance by Europe, indeed, the rest of the world, for that matter, of American lawlessness means that there's no check on the hubris and arrogance in Washington. And when there's no check on hubris and arrogance, it tends to get carried away with itself and to run away with itself. So what's really important is not that, or what is of major importance, is not that we have the troops in Jordan or stirring the pot in Syria or blowing up people with drones in half a dozen countries, spying on the whole world, on the governments of our allies, on the diplomatic missions. All of these things are important in themselves. But what the real impact is that everyone simply takes it. They accept it. You see, look, Snowden tells the whole world, the Americans are listening in on your every communication. You have no privacy whatsoever from the Americans, and yet nobody will step forward and give him asylum. He gives them the most valuable information they can have, but they'd rather have American money than defend the guy who brings them the truth. So you can see the corruption of money. And then we can see with the forcing down of the airliner of the Bolivian president,
Evo
Morales, in order to search it because of some sort of belief that he had Snowden on board, which of course would have been a violation of international law because the Bolivian airliner is Bolivian territory, just like the embassy. The presidential airliner is like an embassy. You can't just go in and search it without contravening all the international laws. And yet, on our orders, 4 Western European governments refused overflight to the plane of the Bolivian president, who was forced to land in Austria, where it was inspected and searched. And yet, what happens? A few South American countries protest, but most of the countries don't because they rather have American money. And what do the Europeans do about the spy? Well, the French said, we should delay the free trade talk for a couple of weeks so there's not any controversy. And the Germans say, oh, no, we can't delay the talks. We want the trade treaty.
And let me just interrupt here just for a second. You're talking about and I talked about this last week in my weekly news wrap-up, the transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. Now, these guys were so mad about our spying that they basically blocked a Bolivian airliner who they believed to have, Snowden on. They were so mad that they went ahead and blocked that jet, and that's how mad they were. They were so mad that they blocked the jet and allowed authorities to search for Snowden, who he wasn't there. But I just want people to know this is a really important transatlantic trade investment partnership, and I will return the floor to you, sir.
Well, first of all, be sure everyone understands your irony that they were so mad about being spied on. They tried to help us catch Snowden, who revealed the spy. I mean, that's the irony. I'm not sure that came across to everybody.
The guy that told them that we were spying on them, they helped us catch him. Or they were trying to help us catch him.
They tried to help us catch him. Of course, he wasn't on the plane. This partnership. The Europeans, it just shows how dumb the Europeans are. They really are dumb. Because what this transatlantic partnership does, just like the trans-Pacific partnership we are foisting on the Asian countries, it takes the European economies and folds them into American economic hegemony. They're going to find that they are now their entire economic policy is structured by what Washington does. They're going to have to support the dollar, which means they'll have to print euros. The same thing is happening to the Asians. So what Washington is doing is found a way to institutionalize the dollar so that it's protected from the printing press that the Fed is running in order to protect the solvency of the banks, in order to fund or finance the $1 trillion budget deficits. So these trade partnerships are to the disadvantage of Europe, and yet they think there's money there for them. They want the money, and so they don't care if we spy on them.
Well, so what about all the talk about them, going to a gold standard or a gold trade settlement standard, and at the big G20 meeting coming up, in September, is they're going to try to, have their own currency. They have all these swaps between Russia and China and India and Brazil and China and all these different currency swaps, even China yuan and in London and all these different things where these countries are trying to move away from the dollar. Are you saying that they're not going to be able to move away from the dollar?
Well, they might be able to move away. It remains to be seen, particularly India. But if Washington succeeds in these transatlantic and trans-Pacific partnership, it will have incorporated the countries of Western and Eastern Europe into its economic mode of operation, and it will have incorporated the Asian economies, not China, but the smaller countries around, into its structured economic way of operating. And this will then commit those countries to the support of American economic policy. And that's what the partnerships are for.
Does this stave off a collapse for the U.S.? I mean, does the U.S.
It could prolong it for some long time.
What does that mean for gold and silver and precious metals and things like that?
Depends on how far-seeing people are. Now, what we see happening is that China is importing a tremendous amount of gold. So they seem to not have much confidence in the longevity of American plans. I'm not sure what the Russians are doing. They
reportedly are also buying gold, as is many other countries.
They have a lot of energy, but Washington is spreading this rumor that we now have 100 years of gas and oil from fracking. That's all false. But they're using that to make Europe think they don't need their energy deals with Russia. So it's all this fracking hype. It's part of the war to deprive Russia of the benefit of its energy resources and to break the connection that Russia has over Europe with energy.
Well, if we don't have this oil, I mean, we're going to have to deliver it. If we say we have it, if we want to break that, we can't just tell them we have it and they can heat their houses with it.
We don't have it for 100 years. We have it maybe for 20.
Ah. That's as far ahead as Washington's thinking.
They could. It's amazing to me they think ahead that far. And then again, you have the fact that Asian peoples in general, they don't know anything about all these trade pacts and all that. All they know is that gold is always a protecting thing from paper money. I mean, how many of them have seen paper money come and go? It's forever, right? And so I think as long as they can still get their hands on gold, Asia will continue to accumulate it. But Washington has put pressure on India to put barriers to the import of gold. You know, they keep adding more taxes and quotas and things like that, and to make it harder for the Indians to acquire it. So how long can Washington rig the whole world? I don't know. I think for a very long time, as long as the world wants Washington's money. And if the dollar is safe, because everybody wants it, then they can continue to print it to pay them off.
So you're saying that we may not have this big collapse that everybody's thinking about. I mean, the economy doesn't look good here. Obamacare, the Democrats are worried about that, you know, absolutely killing the economy. That's why they at least put off the mandate for the business mandate, where if you have a company bigger than 50 or more employees, you have to provide insurance. They put off the company mandate. They still have the individual mandate going on, so they're worried about that. If you take a look at real numbers, even the phony numbers make the economy look like it's growing at 1.8%. I mean, that's what we have, and we don't really have any growth. We have we don't even have fundamentals anymore. I was telling a friend of mine who trades, I said, well, you don't really trade fundamentals. You trade what you think the manipulation is going to be. And he goes, yeah, you're right, I do. I don't trade you don't trade fundamentals. There aren't any. There's no fundamentals in the bond market. There's no fundamentals in the housing market because of rates. There's no fundamentals in the dollar because of all the money printing. There's no fundamentals in the stock market because of the plant protection team and all the other shenanigans and naked short selling and flash trading. And so what is your prognosis for the country, for the economy? I mean, here you are, a former Assistant Treasury Secretary. I mean, does that mean that they have dodged a bullet? It just look, all the data says they're not dodging any bullets. That the economy is at best bouncing on the bottom, as John Williams says.
I know that's right, Greg. There's no economy, and it's not going to go anywhere. But if they can rig the system, they can avoid the consequences of not having an economy. Now, whether they'll be successful, I can't say. I'm just describing that what the purpose of these trade pacts, what the purposes are of these trade pacts. Maybe they won't succeed. I'm not saying they are guaranteed to succeed. What I was saying is it shows how thoughtless the Europeans are. It also shows that they mainly just want money. In other words, here is your ally spying on your own president, your own diplomatic services, on your own citizens. And yet, you're so desperate to be in Washington's good graces and to get more money that you help him, or you try to help him, catch the person who revealed the spying to you. And you can't wait to get into a trade pact, even though you know that the spying is also used to steal all of your economic and commercial secrets. They're stealing all the secrets of the German and French industry and financial institutions so that they can outcompete them or undermine them. And yet, there's no essential protest. The protest is just posturing for the local population. You can tell that Merkel and the French president and the rest of them are not really mad because they're going to go ahead and sign the trade agreement. So that's what I'm saying. If everybody in the world wants to prostitute themselves for money, then prostitution succeeds.
If they don't succeed, If these agreements don't revive flagging economies, I mean, I don't see how these
They're
agreements...
not going to revive any economy. That's not their purpose.
They want to protect the dollar.
They want American hegemony over these parts of the world in order to deny it to Russia and to China.
So if they can keep enough territory away from Russia and China, they win in terms of trade.
Well, it goes beyond trade in terms of standing, influence, power, the ability to call the shots. Look, why does the United States get away with this lawlessness? Because NATO stands behind it.
You said in one of your pieces, we're not merely lawless, but totally out of control. It seems to be totally out of control countries can crash. Can't the United States crash?
If they're on their own.
A bank holiday? Can't some of these banks that have all these derivatives and these hundreds of trillions, I mean, if you believe the Bank of International Settlements, it's 3 trillion. If you believe other people, it's 1.6 quadrillion. It's a huge amount of leverage in the system. I mean, can we dodge that? John Williams says there's so many dollar assets held outside the U.S. and stocks and bonds and actual cash that if people start selling them, that, you know, we could have hyperinflation, that the dollar could turn, we could have a dollar crisis in a heartbeat. What do you say to that?
Well, these things could happen, but they're not guaranteed unless you're on your own. A country on its own is certainly vulnerable to all these. But if it's got large parts of Asia and all of Europe organized behind it, it can dodge these types of problems. And that, I think, is what they're working at.
And what about
what I'm saying? But it's really not just the economic problems that they're dodging. What they're doing is, by having this approval of so much of the world, they can continue all of their lawless actions. They can have presidential airliners blocked from flying over countries. They can force them to land. They can be searched. They can spy on everybody. They can steal their commercial secrets. They can put troops wherever they want, drones blowing up people we're not even at war with. In other words, they have enough cover from NATO and from the Trans-Pacific trade deal, from Japan, in order to get away with acting as if they are above all laws, not just their own country's laws, but all international laws, all treaties. In other words, whatever Washington does is legitimate. Now, of course, that greatly helps the ability of Washington to survive the economic crisis. So that's the point I'm making, the big overall point. Can something go wrong? Can this not work? Of course, it's very risky. I mean, it's very aggressive type of policy. It's based on all kinds of likelihoods that may not work out. But that is what's in place. And it could work out. I mean, you have all these dollar assets, you don't want them to lose value.
Could we have bail-ins? I mean, they're talking about it in Europe, these bail-in scenarios. I can't see how they start a massive bail-in scenario in Europe and everything's fine here in the U.S. Couldn't that be a fly in the ointment? You know, Deutsche Bank got downgraded, Barclays got downgraded, Citigroup is having trouble making, cash transactions in Asia. Couldn't one of these big banks cause a daisy chain of default in the derivative market in the Western global, spectrum?
Well, I don't think anyone knows the consequences of these enormous derivatives because they so greatly dwarf the totality of world resources. So clearly there's nothing that can back them up. There are too many bets made on the same asset. So what the consequences is, I don't know. But all bail-ins is just a way of keeping the banks open by taking the bond holders' equity and turning it into stocks. The bail-in programs that have been written exclude the insured deposits of depositors. So, and moreover, suppose the banks are, the big banks have been insolvent ever since the financial crisis, but they're still there, aren't they? And this is why the Fed has QE, because by buying all those bonds, it keeps the prices of the debt-related instruments on the bank's books high. So as long as the Fed's prepared to buy the bonds, it can keep interest rates low. It can simply buy all the bonds. It's no limit to the Fed's ability to print money. So they can do that. Now, in the past when we've talked, I've stressed that the vulnerability is the dollar. And if the dollar goes on them, then they lose control of the interest rates. But if they get control over the dollar through these trade pacts, or it results in all these other countries having to support the dollar with their own currency. In fact, I can even see that eventually the dollar could become the currency of all those countries in the trade pact. It'd be more convenient to have one currency. So the euro would go, all the Thai baht would go. You see what I'm saying? All these currencies, and so you would have the dollar.
Amazingly predicted one world currency in the Bible. How did they know that?
Well, maybe it's something like that. So I'm just trying to get people to think and to see that what you would expect to happen based on the past, where a country as overextended as the United States would expect severe consequences. They can put that off perhaps for a long time if these various schemes work.
And if they don't work?
Well, there's going to be a big blow up. I think there'll be a big blow up anyhow. But it could be quite a while, not as quick as I would have thought, because Washington is arranging such that everybody, or many countries, have a stake in supporting the dollar. And that then frees them from the consequences of the printing press.
For now.
For now, for a number of years. So it's just, and the bank failures, they can simply just not acknowledge it. They don't have to acknowledge that the bank is insolvent. You know, insolvent banks can function. You know, there's no reason. I mean, a lot of this closing insolvent banks comes from a long time ago when that's just what you did. But we've had these insolvent banks too big to fail. That's what it means. They're too big to fail. That means they're insolvent, but we're not going to let them fail. We've been with this since 2008, right?
And we imperil the country and the dollar and the credit rating.
Right.
To keep five banks open, basically.
That's right. But also some European banks. We're also keeping open to the same policy. And so now, to protect that policy, they have these trade deals, which are not trade deals. They're not trade deals. They are the extension of American economic hegemony deep into Europe and deep into Asia. That's what they are. And they are to get commitments from these countries that block their ability to somehow end up in a Chinese bloc or a Russian bloc. And that's what it's all about. It's essentially a fight on the part of Washington for world hegemony. And the fact that this serves all these other things that I've been describing just makes it that much more desirable a policy for Washington.
Very enlightening, Dr. Paul Craig Roberts. You can read all of his articles on paulcraigroberts.org. Dr. Roberts, thank you for really enlightening us today on usawatchdog.com.
I very much enjoyed talking to you, Greg, and I appreciate what you do.
Thank you, sir.